The world spoke to Elias in a silent, violent poetry of color. The ping of a microwave was a soft, pulsing lavender orb. His wife's laughter, before she left, had been a cascade of liquid gold. And the death of Arthur LeMay, his client, had been a jagged, screaming orange. Elias sat in the sterile silence of the Ethelred Pharmaceuticals waiting room, the phantom orange still burning behind his eyes. It was his curse and his profession, a synesthete consultant, hired by corporations to audition product sounds, alert tones, and brand jingles for their subconscious emotional impact. He was a human focus group of one, with a brain hardwired for synesthesia. But this was different. This was the first time a sound had killed a man. Arthur LeMay, Ethelred's head of ethics, had been found dead in a soundproof sensory deprivation pod, an experience meant to be the ultimate relaxation. The official report, a fatal epileptic seizure, an undiagnosed condition, an unfortunate tragedy. But Elias knew. He had been sitting right outside the pod, calibrating his own senses, when the Orange Screech had torn through his mind's eye, a sound that shouldn't have existed in that vacuum. "Mr. Crow, Miss Reed will see you now." The executive's office was a monument to cool efficiency, glass, steel, and the low, resonant hum of the building's climate control, which registered in Elias's mind as a field of deep, vibrating blue. Anya Reed, head of operations, stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, her posture as rigid as the skyline behind her. Her voice, when she spoke, was a series of sharp silver needles. "Elias, thank you for coming back. We're all still in shock." "I need to talk to you about Arthur's death," Elias said, his own voice a timid, moss-green whisper in his head. That was his flaw, a constitutional timidity, a lifetime of being told his perceptions were too much, incorrect, a neurological glitch. His external goal was clear: expose the truth. His internal need was far more profound: to finally trust the reality of his own senses. "There's nothing to discuss," Anya said, turning. Her smile was a tight, practiced line. The medical report was conclusive: a terrible, random accident. It wasn't random, and it wasn't an accident. Elias clenched his hands, feeling the familiar sweat on his palms. The pod was silent, but I saw something, a specific frequency, an ultrasonic drill. Anya's silver needle voice didn't waver. "A drill? Elias, the construction on the floor below was authorized, but their work had concluded for the day. There were no drills operating at that time." "This wasn't a normal drill. It's a specific brand, the Thortec HVT-40. Its ultrasonic driver creates a unique resonant frequency. I've encountered it before, at a construction site next to my old office. It's unmistakable." He didn't tell her how that earlier experience had left him with a migraine for 2 days, the orange pattern seared into his vision. Show, don't tell. Her gaze was cool, dismissive. "You're suggesting someone assassinated Arthur with a drill? And that you, somehow, heard this through a soundproof wall? The board won't entertain this, Elias. Frankly, it sounds like the stress of the event has exacerbated your condition." There it was, the primary force of antagonism, not just a person, but the cold, rational world that dismisses subjective experience as madness. Anya Reed embodied it. Her skepticism was a wall more impenetrable than the pod's insulation. She was challenging not just his theory, but the very foundation of who he was. Driven from the office, the phantom orange now mingled with the humiliating green of his own fear. They wouldn't listen. No one ever did. He could spend a lifetime mapping the secret colors of the world, and they would still call him delusional. This was his dark night of the soul, the crushing weight of his own flaw, the temptation to surrender to their rational explanation. But then he thought of Arthur. A good man, a man who asked difficult questions about Ethelred's new neural enhancement drug, cognitane. Arthur had been nervous before the session, had muttered something about pushing back the launch, about unforeseen side effects. He'd called it a matter of conscience. Conscience. The word landed in Elias's mind not as a color, but as a solid, weightless shape. A key. He couldn't convince the board, but he could find proof. The Ethelred building was a symphony of controlled chaos, but Elias had learned to mute the irrelevant movements. He walked the corridors not as a consultant, but as a hunter. He focused his attention downward toward the renovation site on the floor below. The low thrum of generators was a brown sludge, the whine of a circular saw a brittle yellow. He filtered them out. He found a service stairwell that led to the lower floor. The door was marked with a hard hat area sign. The air here was thick with the smell of dust and curing concrete, a gritty, gray sensation. He closed his eyes, leaning against the cold concrete wall, and listened. And then he found it. A low, pervasive hum, almost below the threshold of normal hearing. To anyone else, it would be background noise. To Elias, it was a faint, persistent pulse of jagged orange. It was the Thortec HVT-40 idling. It was the same color, the same pattern. It was here. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic red rhythm. He followed the color, a thread of invisible poison leading him through a maze of plastic sheeting and stacked drywall. He pushed aside a heavy tarp and found the source. Not a drill bit breaking concrete, but a device mounted on a tripod aimed precisely upward. A sonic emitter. Wires snaked from it to a small black box with a digital timer. It was a weapon, meticulously placed to channel its lethal frequency through the building's superstructure, directly into the pod where Arthur LeMay had been sitting. A matter of conscience had been silenced with terrifying precision. "I told you your condition was making you see things, Elias." He spun around. Anya Reed stood there, holding a sleek, silenced pistol. Her silver needle voice was now cold and flat, devoid of its corporate sheen. "But you were more persistent than I gave you credit for." "You," Elias breathed. The Orange Screech in his memory seemed to flare, aligning with her presence. "You killed him. He was going to delay cognitane." "He was going to bury it," she corrected, her steps measured on the dusty concrete. "Over some theoretical risk of synaptic burnout. Billions of dollars, Elias, a legacy. I couldn't let one weak, ethical man stand in the way of progress. The sonic induction was elegant, a fatal seizure in a man under stress. And your synesthesia, well, it was an unforeseen variable, but one I can now correct." The fear was still there, a cold, green sludge in his veins. But as he stared down the barrel of the gun, something in Elias shifted. The world of color wasn't a curse or a distraction. It was his reality. It was the truth. And for the first time, he chose to fully embrace it, to act within it. He didn't look at the gun. He looked at the sonic emitter. He saw the timer on the control box. With a sudden, violent motion, he kicked the tripod. The emitter tipped over, its dish now pointing directly at Anya Reed. Her eyes widened. "What are you—" Elias slammed his hand down on the emitter's manual activation switch. There was no audible sound, but in Elias's mind, the world erupted in a concussive blast of jagged, screaming orange. He gritted his teeth, the familiar pain spiking behind his eyes, but he held on, forcing himself to watch. Anya Reed didn't hear a thing, but her body reacted instantly. A look of profound confusion crossed her face, followed by a violent, uncontrollable spasm. Her hands flew to her head. The gun clattered to the floor. She staggered, her eyes rolling back, and then she collapsed, twitching into the dust. The orange screech faded from Elias's mind, leaving a throbbing, painful afterimage. He stood, panting in the sudden silence, the only sound the faint, returning hum of the building's blue climate control. He looked at the emitter, then at Anya's still form. He had used the weapon that killed Arthur to save himself. He had turned his flaw into his strength. Weeks later, the official story was complex. Anya Reed was found to have been the victim of a faulty prototype of the very sonic technology she had commissioned, a tragic accident during an illicit inspection. The Cognitane launch was indefinitely delayed for further safety reviews. Elias sat in his quiet apartment, the city's nocturnal symphony playing in muted colors against his window. The phantom orange was finally fading, replaced not by fear, but by a quiet, solid certainty. He had always seen the world differently. Now he knew that seeing differently wasn't a weakness. It was a form of sight others lacked. He picked up his phone, his movement deliberate, his internal state calm and resolved. He had a call to make to the Investigative Journalists Association. His external goal had evolved. It was no longer just about exposing a single truth, but about offering his unique perception as a tool for uncovering others. The man who saw the colors of sound was no longer just a consultant. He was a witness the world could no longer afford to ignore.